All right. Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Important Conversations. As you may or may not know, I am a personal wellness junkie and I spend pretty much all of my free time researching anything that I can around trauma and the healing journey. I'm also a certified health and life coach who's currently undertaking mastery program. And my goal here is to help people understand unresolved childhood trauma and the effects it has in adulthood. So I hope to educate and empower others to heal their own personal trauma and shed a light on this taboo topic. So today with me, I have a special friend, many, many years. Ernie Austin is here to join us for the conversation. So I just want to welcome Ernie and say thank you so much for being here with me today. And why don't we kick this conversation off with telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay. Thank you for the invite. So I've been in what I would call the mental health field for the past 3 years. I've always kind of been involved working with kids or with people through volunteer work and past jobs. But I went to college roughly 5 years ago for child and youth care with addictions course. I then kind of went to two different jobs, both of which I've done for the better part of the last 3 years. So one is an educational assistant in the school system, and then as a youth care worker in residential homes programs and that sort of thing. So that's kind of my, I guess, working background when it comes to mental health.
Great, awesome. It sounds like you're pretty involved with the community and kind of getting out there and getting to know people.
Yeah, yeah. I volunteered as a youth hockey coach, as you know. It was 23 years. I've also done like some support work with different clients, people with needs, and going into homes and helping out that way. So yeah, I've always kind of been involved with kids and youth and in the community. So
Very nice. We need more people like you. I can say that for sure. Um, so what is your belief and or understanding around the effects of unresolved childhood trauma in adults specifically?
in adults specifically, I think it's actually a lot of similarities to youth, just that I think it's a little more recognizable, I find, in my experiences with adults. But like you'll see it in relationships, friendships. You certainly see, like I've always joked for years. I say joked, but you meet the child, and you see certain things in them, and you kind of wonder why maybe that might be. And then you meet the parents, and then you kind of get a better understanding
Mm,
of maybe where that child's come from.
mm,
So in adults, like I find I see it, people, uh, I think it's harder as an adult to ask for help.
mm,
We're so ingrained in who we are, or where our background is, things that we've done, we've grown up, we've seen. So I find a lot of adults, we push people away. It kind of embarrassment can set in, or that feeling like you're not adequate enough, or that you're not good enough. So it's easier to kind of sit, I find, in silence. With adults, I find it's easier to sit in silence and kind of like stay inward, or like keep to ourselves more. And again, like these are things that you will see in youth as well, but I find I notice it a lot more in adults.
mm,
So people will kind of, and I'm guilty of this myself. We I find as adults, will you stay in your wheelhouse, or you stay in like what you're comfortable with. So whether that be at work, or friendships, or you're like, even going out. So a lot of people will stay in more
mm,
because that feels safer,
mhm.
right? Or that's you know dating. You see it in dating where you always kind of wonder, well, geez, why does that person always continually date the same style of person or same type of person, right? So I
Mhm.
think you see in adults that certain things are ingrained in them. Uh, excuse me, and we repeat those patterns. So
Exactly. You actually hit the nail right on the head with something that I wanted to speak on, and that was around that whole shame, the guilt, um,
mhm,
the anger piece. It's like
yeah,
when something happens to us, our reaction to it is a reaction that's going to keep us alive, right? That's
yeah,
just the human reaction, is to keep us alive. So although the reaction that we had in that moment served us at one time to keep us alive and keep us safe, the problem is that reaction becomes a pattern or a loop. Then we play that
mhm,
out over and over and over as we age. And
yeah,
so it's really important, like you said, that whole comfort zone. We get used to that pattern. It's not that it's a good pattern, it's not that
yeah,
it's a healthy pattern, but we
yeah,
get so used to playing that pattern out, that it becomes like autopilot. And I feel like that's how people get stuck, is because
mhm,
they don't even know where to start, because it's just been something that's lingered for so long.
yeah,
And to touch on the piece about children, I feel, and I had my own personal childhood trauma, and for me, it was around that whole shame piece. You feel bad. You feel like you did something
mhm,
bad. You feel like you were the one who
yeah,
caused it or what have you. So you're afraid to ask for help because you're afraid to lose that love from your
yeah,
parents or that love from whoever it is, right? Your
yeah,
guardian.
yeah,
Which then again plays tolls in, like what you said, in relationships later on in life. You start your It's kind of like, how they talk about the bar, you got to raise your bar, or your bar is too low, stuff
mhm,
like that.
yeah,
I believe that that's where that comes into play, and it's because for we look for situations that we know we will be comfortable in, we will be safe
correct,
in.
yeah,
So if we survived something once, then we know we can survive it again, which is again coming back to
mhm,
that whole comfort zone of things, right? Why
correct,
people don't want to change.
yeah.
Is there anything that you want to add to that?
No, I just think you're right. It's staying in your comfort zone, right?
Mm,
And change pushes those comfort zones,
yes.
right? And that's not easy. And again, I'm guilty as anyone when it comes to that. It's hard. Change is hard.
Mm,
So it's easier to continue to do the things that you're comfortable with
yeah.
than it is to try something new and maybe as we might look at it as, well, we're going to land on our face, or we're going to fall flat on our face, or we're going to screw up, we're going to
Yeah.
so yeah, I think for sure, staying in your comfort zone is definitely an effect from childhood trauma.
Hmm. And I love what you said there about um, trying something new and being afraid of that. We are afraid of the unknown, right? That again
Yeah.
is a survival technique from way back in the Stone
Mhm.
Ages. And what I like to do is I like to try and reframe people's beliefs around that.
Yeah.
Well, while the new things can be scary, the new
Yeah.
things are also exciting and offer opportunity and a chance for something better, something greater, right?
Yeah.
Um, and there was something else that I was going to touch on, and it slipped my mind. So we will come
Okay.
back to that if
Yeah.
it comes. But I wanted to ask you, Ernie, if you think that trauma is avoidable. Do you believe it?
No, I don't. I'm not convinced it is, because a lot of it comes from outside of ourselves. So most of it, I guess, so to speak, comes from outside of us. So we're not in control, right? Which I think comes back to the point of controlling what as much as we can, right? And doing that keeps us as safe as we can.
Mm,
I think is how a lot of us feel. Because no, a lot of people's trauma, although we've probably contributed in some capacity, a lot of it has probably come from outside of us or outside of our control. So
yes.
no, I like to say it's avoidable. No, no. Are there instances or times where we maybe could have avoided it? Sure, but over a lifetime, no.
Yeah.
I think the answer is no.
And I would have to agree with you and say, even to touch on when it's maybe possible that we could have avoided something, I also feel like life presents us with lessons. Some of them
Mhm.
are extremely hard, extremely excruciating, and feel unfair, but it's
Yep.
still life presenting us with some sort of a lesson that we need to learn. And um, I keep losing my train of thought here. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
um, I was going to ask you if you think it's possible to heal unresolved trauma. Do you think it's possible to move forward to heal from that?
Absolutely. I do. It takes time, and there's no set timetable. Depending on the person, depending on the trauma, depending on the support they have. You know, um, when I did child and youth work, you're always trying to provide like um, little building blocks or little tools, so to speak. Something we used, a term we used a lot when I coached hockey. Actually, was you're trying to put tools in the toolbox
Mm,
for the kids to use, right? So, and hopefully they can figure out when to pull the right tool out to use at the right time, right?
mm,
But that takes a lot of time, and that takes experience, and which is kind of comes back to your original question of like how childhood trauma affects a person's adult life, because majority, if not all, of that childhood trauma does carry forward in some capacity. Um, for some, much larger than others.
mhm,
So it's but I think with time, supports, as we grow as people, I will say, like, for myself, the older I get, the better I know myself. So the more life skills I have, or the more tools I have, I guess, to use to move forward with. And I think that's kind of probably pretty common for most people. So with time, yeah, I do think people can heal. Things can get better. Um, I don't. It doesn't go away. I think what it is that people learn how to better cope,
mhm.
how to better have themselves prepared next time maybe something similar, or a tough situation comes along. I think people are a little more prepared for the next time, and
Yes,
handle it better, and so on as they move throughout their life.
absolutely. I love what you're talking about, specifically around the child and youth work. I believe that some of the things that I've learned through coaching and on my own personal journey towards healing, I feel like these tools, like you call them, because we refer to them as the same,
Yeah.
should be things that are taught in school to children in how to manage emotions and how to manage thoughts and regulate those things. Because I feel like all too often what we're taught in society is really to suppress any extreme emotion,
Hmm.
and life's purpose is to experience the whole full range of emotion. And that's why a lot of people who go through trauma feel shut down, they feel lost, they feel like they don't know who they are because they're not allowed to fully express themselves, right? um,
Yeah.
and then I wanted to go back to something because I remembered what it was now. And it was around when you said circumstances being outside of ourselves, uncontrollable circumstances. And
Hmm.
that is so true because we cannot control all circumstances. That is just impossible. And to try and think that way is irrational. But what we can control are our feelings and our thoughts towards those circumstances.
Yeah.
And I believe that that is the approach that needs to be used when it comes to healing. For
Hmm.
example, you can't change what happened to you. It's in the past and it's done. But you can absolutely change your thoughts and your feelings towards it. Right.
Hmm.
And again, like you said, that is going to take time. It is going to take patience. It's going to take practice,
Hmm.
support, community, a whole bunch of things, love and like gentleness and compassion.
Yeah.
So what sort of healing work do you have you seen people use? have you maybe tried yourself, or do
Mhm.
you recommend for other people? I mean, there's a whole array of different
Yes.
techniques out there, but do
Well,
you have any that you
yeah.
recommend?
So one you more or less just hit it without saying it, but it's so CBT, right? So cognitive behavioral therapy. Um, relating your thoughts to your feelings to actions and so on, right? So kind of going through that scenario, um, and like you said, you learning to be able to control how we respond goes a long ways, right? So realizing like, what part we play in it, what can or can't we control, and then what part are we, what part, what control part are we willing to kind of relinquish or give up
Mm,
on? Because, like we said, we can't control everything. So, what parts are we willing to give up? And then the parts that we are willing to control or that we can control, I should say, not, you know, um, how are we going to react to those?
mm,
And how do we want to react to those? How do we want to be left feeling with those parts? And then, so what can you move forward with in, I don't know if it's a positive manner, but like in a successful, or in a just kind of what way can you move forward so that you're not hurting yourself, I guess is maybe, it's not maybe a proper term, but it's
uh, we don't
reality.
we don't have to be proper around here. It's all good.
There you go. Yeah. But yeah, I think that plays an important part. Having a handle on that, working on that. There's forms online that you can find for those things. I think I've talked about this for many years, long before this field, but like having a good support system, which isn't always easy, and our support systems will change as we get older and as we grow. But you got to have people you can trust, people you can count on,
Mhm.
people that aren't going to judge negatively. There's always going to be some sort of judgment um, in almost anything we do, but people that aren't going to knock you for those things, and people that aren't going to just give up on you for those things,
Mm,
and people that will support you and be there when you need them through those things is really important.
mhm.
And so you don't want to, you can find those people. We want to keep those people. We don't want to lose them.
Yes.
And those, sometimes that's family, sometimes that's friends, it could be a work colleague.
Mm,
Um, there's obviously forms of care that you can find therapists and so on for that kind of stuff as well. If you're not, sometimes when our thoughts are that personal or our trauma is that deep, we're not prepared to share that with the people that care about us. So
right.
our support system might have to extend beyond our friends and our family or colleagues or so on, right? So, if that's what a person needs, they need someone to hear it that isn't in their immediate support system, so they can feel safe around that, and maybe, get a little better handle on how they want to approach that moving forward before they share it with those close around them. That can happen too,
Mm.
you know.
I love all of those recommendations. I think they're super powerful. And I definitely would agree with you personally when talking about it being a hard conversation to have sometimes with those who are closest to us, right? Because it's almost like we want to protect those people.
Hmm.
And so it can be scary to think, first of all, that they might judge you,
Hmm.
or they might not love you, or they might not understand you.
Hmm.
And so, from my personal experience, I know I found it way easier to talk to people who were removed from my circle about some of the things. And that is like how I started my journey, was kind of talking to people who didn't know me, and then slowly working back inside the circle.
Hmm.
It took time, and it took courage and
Yeah.
compassion, right? um, I also really love when you brought up control, that control piece,
Hmm.
because what we kind of talked about before was circumstances and situations being out of your control. So one of the side effects from repressing or suppressing your childhood trauma can actually be that need for control in your
Yes.
adult life. And so then, I mean,
Mhm.
I'm talking about in relationships, I'm talking about
Yeah.
in work, I'm talking about in how you parent or how you're
Mhm.
a fur parent, and you almost crave that control over everything else. And
Absolutely.
some people would refer that as being OCD
I
or
just you hit that
right.
right on the head. Yep.
And
Exactly
so
where my mind went.
yeah, it's not even
Yep.
really OCD. It's just this fear of not being in control
Yep.
because maybe one of the last times you weren't in control, something really bad happened.
Mhm.
Um, and then another little reframe that I'm going to chuck in here for people is around judgment. And you're right, it's going to happen. Unfortunately, it is just a part of that journey. It's going to happen. And that's why it's important to start with those people who you feel comfortable sharing with. But I would also encourage and invite people to trade judgment for curiosity, right? Instead of,
Absolutely.
I mean, even if you're not the one who experienced the trauma, instead of judging that person, be
Mhm.
curious about it. Maybe ask them some questions and find out if you can help them or how you can help them, because it's a very common tragic event nowadays that people deal with childhood trauma. And I know personally, I'm thankful that this is becoming more of a normalized topic where, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was not. Um,
Yeah.
and I feel like this is a conversation that needs to further continue, go deeper, and be more normalized, right?
Mhm. It's funny you say that, like what we know now compared to what we would have known years ago. So like for me, probably been 15 years ago now, I would have had a bout with depression, but didn't realize it. I didn't know what was wrong per se, or I didn't know, why I couldn't get up in the morning or didn't want to get up and go to work, and why I, was sad a lot, and why I, wasn't as outgoing as I used to be. And, and I remember having a talk with my manager at the time, and he said, he openly said, like, you're in a rut. I know you're in a rut, is how we termed it then.
Mm,
And I just thought it was, oh, you know what? It's just I'm just having a rough go right now, and never thought beyond that. And then, of course, the old school mentality is you just keep going, right? And I guess to some degree, that's still how things are today, and still, how things are going to be moving forward. There still has to be a level of getting up and pushing forward and so on. But that was kind of where we left it off at, was
yeah.
just, oh well, you just got to keep going. And then we just kind of, sweep it under the rug, and then away we go. And I just continue to trot in every day, and I'm not happy, and I'm struggling, but we're not really doing anything about it, or I'm not doing anything about it. So yeah, that certainly hits home of things that we're more aware of now, and it's a little easier to reach out for help now than it would have been back then. And you
Yeah.
know not feeling as judged now as maybe I would have back then.
Yeah. I feel like it's like if you were to compare it to slapping a band-aid on it, whereas
Mhm.
getting to why it happened in the first place, kind of like that root
Yeah.
cause. There's a lot of research around suppressed emotions and
Yeah.
a direct link to illnesses like autoimmune disorders, which that is something that I personally have dealt with and am dealing
Yeah.
with cancer, with depression, like what you just touched
Yeah.
on. And
Yeah.
it's baffling, and it's nobody's fault. It's just because we don't talk about it enough. But any of like a traumologist, an oncologist, a psychologist, any of the ecologists, when
Mhm.
you go to them with your problems, the issue is that they don't ask questions like, did you suffer from childhood trauma?
Mhm.
How do you feel about yourself?
Yeah.
Are you happy with your life? They don't ask you those questions because they're not trained to. Like they're honestly not trained. And
Yeah.
there's so many studies around this. But the fact that we understand how emotions work in the body and that the brain and the body are directly connected, you cannot sever
Mhm.
them or you'll die, You know,
Yeah.
and that's what happens with disease and illness. That's why it's brought on by suppressed emotion.
Yeah.
I find that whole piece super fascinating, and I could clearly go on about that for a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but so I want to know if you have any thoughts or feelings or something coming up for you around that whole side of things, where a lot of our illnesses nowadays are brought on by unresolved emotions,
Hmm.
unresolved
Hmm.
trauma.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think we all do or have had things that linger, that we haven't dealt with. Um, and I think, some stuff that we deal with, it could linger for a long time.
Mm,
It just might not go away anytime soon. And you just can't suppress things. You can't, when you have strong feelings around something, you can't suppress that. You can't. And whatever that might be in, it's whether it's loss, or like loss of a loved one, or um fear, like a feeling of failure towards something that you've done, or childhood trauma, or whatever. It might be a one-time incident, it might be a childhood long or a lifelong trauma, or what have you. But if you feel strongly about something, it doesn't go away, right?
mm,
You can't just suppress that. You can't be like, oh, I'm not going to think about that today, or I'm not going to do. You just, if it's there and you feel it, you feel it.
right.
So you got to find little ways to to deal with that, or to learn how to live with it. Because sometimes dealing with it isn't necessarily that it goes away. It's just that we become a little more comfortable with it, or we learn how to deal with it a little bit better. It's not that it necessarily just ceases to exist.
Right. We have a saying where I did my training, and it's called what we say is what resist persists. We resist persists, and it's
Hmm.
like all
For
about that
sure.
exact same thing. It's like
Yeah.
um, wherever you feel the most strong about
Hmm.
something, or the most frightened or nervous or scared or
Yeah.
anxious, whenever you have that big emotion, that is absolutely without doubt exactly where you need to start, and you need to push through that resistance, because the resistance is there as a not a coping mechanism, but it's safety, right? It's safety. It's like, no, you can't come in here, right? It's like a barricade. It's a brick wall. You can't enter. No go zone. And it's that is where you need to get into. You need to gently work your way in there so that you can start to kind of pull back those layers and figure out why this triggers you, or why you react this way to certain things, or why you treat people this way, or why you treat yourself this way. Because I can tell anybody this one thing: how you speak to yourself in the mirror, how you think about yourself, the things you say to yourself in the run of a day is directly correlated with how you feel about yourself, obviously, but then like your self worth. And oftentimes, if you've dealt with any sort of trauma, you don't have a lot of self worth, and you don't really feel like you deserve or are good enough for anything. And you are so hard on yourself. So I guess that's one of my first tips to people is recognize and just start to be aware of how you speak to yourself, right? Because the way we speak to ourselves, sometimes you would never speak to anybody like that. You know what I mean? You would never ever treat
Yeah.
anybody else like that. So it's really just being aware of the things that are running through our head. And once we're aware of it, then we can start to adjust those over time, whether it's through reading, through listening to podcasts, through journaling, through some of the techniques that we talked about. Um, and I want to touch back on that gut instinct that you were talking about. And I feel like it's the same thing wherever you kind of feel that tap, right? Whether it's for like what you want to do with your life, or maybe you get like an intuitive hit for like a job that you should apply for, or something that you should apply for. follow those little nuggets. That's like, I believe that all those little taps on the shoulder or gut feelings are there for a reason. They're there to guide you down the path that you're supposed to be taking in this life, right? Um, so I want to get a little bit more maybe upbeat here. So tell me one of your favorite songs right now that's on your playlist.
Let's go with Uptown Funk. Bruno
Ooh,
Mars. Yeah.
that's a good
Right.
one. Yeah, I love it.
It's funny you say that, because that, like, where I wanted to touch next would be like kind of how things I've done
Hmm.
to help myself when I am at my lower points, or my points when I am struggling. Right. So like, and you'll certainly have heard this statement before, but fill your cup. Right. So so for me, I'm social, I'm outgoing. So for me, part of filling my cup is getting in friend and family time.
Hmm.
It's being at the rink. I've done that for a long time. It's very familiar. So it's at the rink, it's coaching hockey, it's watching hockey. We have a family cottage, family camp
Hmm.
that I like to spend a lot of time at. I have dogs, and I think for people, a lot of little steps of doing things, that we enjoy, and positive things for us, because Lord knows we all have a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but we all have maladaptive coping strategies as well, right? That we don't need to do. But find your niche of things that you really enjoy, that are good for you, and start working from there. When people are struggling or down, or trying to deal with some of these things, so like you said, break out the playlist, put on those positive, those fun, upbeat songs, or whatever it is, and then start working from there. Right. So fine, it might be reading, could be writing,
Yeah.
could be drawing, painting, coloring. Runners, I find a lot of people that run are going to tell you that they need that. Right. They need that to um, just to get, like, kind of escape and get away, and to deal with things.
Yeah.
And I'm sure burning the energy isn't a bad one neither, or a bad part to that.
Yeah.
I'm not a runner, but I do like sports. I do have my own way of kind of burning energy off. But yeah, I find talking to a lot of friends and colleagues and stuff that are runners. That's a lot of what it is for them. It's just getting out, and they usually have their tunes cranked, and it's time to themselves, and getting out, and kind of burning that energy off, and kind of resetting, so to speak.
Mm. There's so much goodness in what you just said around, well, all of it, but around doing things that bring you joy. Because
Hmm.
I find if you aren't trying to fit, and you have to consciously make an effort to fit those things in there, right? Life is busy now. Like, we have full days of working and everything else. So filling some gaps with things that bring you joy. And like you said about people who run or are really creative, have that creative side, I feel like it's almost a sense of getting out of your head, where you're on that thought loop, you're on the hamster wheel going around and around, getting out of your head and getting into your body, right? And it gives you that break from all those crazy emotions and thoughts that we stew on for way too long. And it's what you said about filling your cup. I wanted to put a joke in there because we are from the East Coast about filling your boots, because fill your boots is something that we traditionally say.
Yeah.
But I do love the filling your bucket or filling your cup. I often talk about that with my 6-year-old Ember, and we actually have a book, and it's something around the lines of, "Did you fill your bucket today?"
Mhm.
And it's about making sure that you do the things that bring you joy, so that you're happy and you're content, and then from that point you can help other people. It's like the traditional put your own mask on before you put somebody else's mask on, right? Like, you got to take care of yourself first before you can help other people, or else you will just burn out
Yeah.
completely. um and some of the things, like, I'll share some of the things that I do too. And when I was really young, before I talked about some of the things that happened to me, and before I was willing to open up about it, I really was a big writer. I used to write poems and I used to write letters, and I thought I was writing songs. Who knows? But singing, like music, is really big for me. I've always used music as a form of healing. Oftentimes, you can listen to my playlist and know what kind of mood or where I'm at, depending on
Yes.
what I'm listening to,
Yeah.
because it's that emotional connection to the music that
Mhm.
I love so much. And I might not be the greatest singer, but I tell you what, when I am alone, I'm a friggin' rock star, right? And it's all about just having fun with it. So I really appreciate you sharing some of the modalities and some of the ways that you've used things in your past as well. And just like dancing, again, it's just about like, I feel like those are some of the ways that we're able to express ourselves in our true form, right? Without having to use words necessarily, if it's something like dancing or playing sports or something like that. It's a way of just being who you are, because so many times we shut that side down in us. We don't allow ourselves to be who we authentically are, which is the whole problem in the first place, is right, is like being disconnected from who we are, from the traumatic events that happened to us, and then from societal norms and all that. But that's another can of worms right
Mhm.
there. So what else do I want to touch on here? Let me see.
Can I just
Well,
touch on one quick thing?
absolutely.
Yeah. So just talking about like trauma and difficult things that we've been through, whether it be a bad work experience, even a job, or a dating relationship, or different things, obstacles that people go through in life. It's usually one bad thing, or one big bad thing, I'll call it, or one or two bad moments, or so on. But healing is not one good moment or not one good thing. It is a lot of little things, little moments. It takes a lot of those to help kind of counter
Mm,
that big trauma moment, or those bigger trauma moments, or those big life events that haven't gone well.
right.
And I think sometimes it's easy to forget that, especially when we're struggling, or when people are down, or feel like they're out, or whatever you want to call it. It's easier to it's easy to forget that it takes time
Hmm.
to get back to a good point, or to a better point.
Right.
And it takes a lot of little things, a lot of little moments, a lot of days, weeks, years, to get back maybe to where we want to be. But it can be done. As quickly as I say that, it can be done, though. The key there is that it does take time, but
Right.
it can be done.
Yeah, I believe that in the beginning, especially, it takes a lot of efforting. You actually
Mhm.
have to make the choice on a regular basis. It's almost like a
Yep.
mindset. You wake up in the morning and you say, not today, not
Mhm.
today. And then eventually, once you get used to, feeling the feels and going through and allowing yourself to experience happier things and
Mhm.
see the little things, like you were saying, kind of those little blessings and blessings throughout the day,
Yeah.
it becomes more of a habit to start to think and feel that way. And
And
then the
that
journey becomes easier, right? But I believe that it's an efforting, it's a constant thing, it's a mindset, which is a mindset is like a choice. You have to choose to
Mhm.
come from that positive place, or almost surrender and just stay stuck wherever you are. And all due respect to every different walks of life, every different type of trauma out there, because there's a lot. This doesn't detract from what you've been through. It doesn't say that, I don't like to compare people's journeys, because everybody's so different. And really, what I've learned is that trauma is not the traumatic event that happened to you. Yes, that is very traumatic, and that is what starts the whole ball rolling in the first place. But the trauma that you experience is the emotional, it's all the stuff that happens inside of you. It's your thoughts and your emotions that are caused from that event. And that's why it's so imperative to want to heal those traumatic events,
Mhm.
because it's to do with thoughts and feelings, which is something you carry with you all day, every day. You can't escape it, right?
It's how we process it,
Yeah,
how we
exactly.
process the trauma that ends up being the bigger part.
And then storing it inside or expressing it, right? Those are the
Mhm.
other two sides of the coin there. So tell me a few things that you are grateful for right now in your life.
Family,
Mm,
my parents, my sister, my niece, my nephew, friends. I've had some time off recently, so getting to spend more time with friends. Um, yeah, getting out and COVID kind of coming to more of a close, hopefully, or more of a. We're definitely in the better parts of COVID right now. Uh,
yes.
this isn't like a year ago or even 6 months ago. Um,
Mhm.
so I think just having some parts of that come back to more of a norm or a better place is nice. Getting out and not, when COVID would have first happened, even going out in public felt weird all of a sudden.
Mhm.
You kind of like those awkward. Whoops, I went up or I went down the aisle and I was supposed to go up the aisle, right? You realize the arrow's pointing the opposite direction that you're going. So like even little things like that right now, I'm glad to see COVID kind of coming to a wrap and being able to get life back to a better place and more of a norm and so on. So yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the arrows on the floors in stores, because I was in a store the other day, and it's when I for the first time realized that things are slightly slowly going back to normal because the arrows were not on the floor anymore, and I was like,
Nice.
freedom. I was like,
Yeah.
holy cow, I can go
Yeah.
up or down this aisle. It felt pretty cool, actually, especially
Yeah.
after all that time. That's a long
Yeah.
time
Yes.
to be dealing with stuff like this. Like, I mean, everybody's dealing with the same thing. And
Yes.
I feel like where we live, we're a little bit more lucky, I will say. There's less people around here, so it's a little bit more free. For example, where I live, I'm looking out my windows and all I see are trees. I don't see any houses, I don't see any people or buildings. So I consider that something to be grateful for. um, just yesterday, actually, I was home by myself and I took my dog down to the creek, and I had a little nap on the rocks by the creek, and it was so amazing. And it's just those little moments, just allowing yourself to just kind of shut off and just like pause and take those moments and recharge. I feel like that's really important to just kind of, that's what I'm working on, is honoring my body more, and honoring what my body wants. So we'll wrap it up here, but do you want to share maybe some of your takeaways from our conversation, or some of your insights about this conversation today?
Yeah, I think I find uh, the more I talk about the stuff, like these types of things, the more I talk about personal experiences around it, work experiences, seeing what some others have gone through. I think it feels. I don't think it'll ever get to the point that it's um, regular coffee table talk,
Yeah.
as it shouldn't. But I think I become more comfortable talking about it with people that I feel comfortable and that I can trust, right? So around family and friends, and it's not um, it's not taboo like it once was, right? Talking about trauma and depression or those struggles that people have. Um, I think it just at one time it was just way too easy to sweep that under the rug, and I think we're getting to a better point in society where people don't do that, or they don't do it as much. And I think we're doing a better job of normalizing it and encouraging people to speak up, to speak out, to share when they can, or what they're comfortable with sharing. And I think definitely for me, I'm getting to a better spot with that, much better than I would have years ago. So I think it's nice to have these types of conversations and to share with others. I think when you hear others talk and share about these types of things, um, there's always something where you're like, "Yep, I can relate to that,"
Mm,
or "Yep, been there, done that," or "Yep, I feel that way too," or "I can understand that." I think the empathy side kicks in quite quickly when you start hearing people talk about this kind of thing. I think it's easy. It's easier and easier all the time to relate in
mm,
some capacity, or to be able to see to understand that person's viewpoint. You
mm,
know, it's and to be able to say, yeah, I can understand why you might feel that way, or why you might deal with things a certain way. Now that you tell a little bit of your story, I think, I think as time goes on, that's certainly things that I'm finding.
definitely. I agree with that. And about the connection, I feel like humans, we're social animals and we all crave
Mhm.
that connection, right? And
Yeah.
the more that we can open up around these hard topics, these challenging topics, the better connection we're going to be able to have with ourselves, first of
Mhm.
all, but the better connections we're going to be able to have with absolutely everything else around us: work,
Yeah.
family, friends, relationships, everything, kids, everything, right? It's like a domino effect. And I also feel like for a really long time, somewhere along the lines, we kind of all got divided. We started to think in such a singular way, right? And I feel like healing is done in community. It's done with others because it is very, very hard, nearly impossible to do it on your own, which is
Yes.
why it's always encouraged to reach out and talk to people and find that community where you feel a part of and you feel safe. Because we are everything around us. We are all one. We are all connected. And as woo woo as that sounds to some people watching, it's
Mhm.
true. We are all one.
Yeah.
So I just want to end off with saying thank you so much, Ernie, for taking the time, having this conversation with me. I'm grateful for this conversation and for you today. Um, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your thoughts and your insights with us. And I look forward to chatting again soon. So to all the listeners, thank you so much for watching, and there will be more to come next time. All righty. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks.